Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Young Guns. We have I'm here with my partner in crime, Jackson, and we got Wade Bowman from NC State. Thanks so much for coming on, man. Excited to talk some pack.
Absolutely, man. Like I said, if there's one thing I love to do, it's talk NC State football. And we got a big bowl game coming up that I think everybody's excited for.
So, before the season, what were the expectations for the pack coming into the season?
Well, I mean, a lot of people had us at least contending for the ACC title. We're one of I believe it's three teams who have never actually made an ACC championship appearance. And this was the team that was supposed to change that. And a lot of people had us in as a dark horse playoff candidate. Obviously we didn't stack up quite that well to those expectations, but there were a lot of things that transpired over the year that kind of changed that narrative.
Mm-hmm. And what were the thoughts on Devin Leary? Were people thinking Heisman talk going into the year? What were the expectations?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, last year Devin broke our single season touchdown record, and to take a record from a guy like Philip Rivers, program legend, went on to do great things in the NFL. It's a big deal. And I think he got a lot of disrespect in the offseason after having a year like that. So this year it was kind of more about branding him to be an individual player. NC State tried really hard to push the whole D. Leary delivers narrative, just trying to get him more into that national spotlight. And obviously it didn't end up the way anybody would have wanted it to. He went down pretty early in the season with an injury, but now he's off to Kentucky, off to greener pastures. Hopefully he can turn it back around.
Yeah. Speaking of to Kentucky, what was the NC State faithful reaction to Devin Leary transferring Kentucky? Did it really hurt NC State? Did it help them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Devin was a great quarterback last year, but we saw 5 games from him this year before he went down against FSU, and he definitely hadn't stacked up quite as well to his performance from last year. And in the time after he went down, we saw Jack Chambers. He's not going to be around next year. He's a graduate transfer. Jack's a great guy, but he just wasn't really built for the FBS level of football. And once we realized that, we moved on to MJ Morris, who through 3 appearances, I mean, he got us a gritty comeback win over Virginia Tech at home. Incredible game. He dominated Wake Forest in NC State's really marquee win of the season in Carter Finley, and he had a pretty poor showing against Boston College in what a lot of people say is one of the worst losses of the Dave Doran era. But he was a true freshman, 19 years old. And I think that really is the future of the program. So for Devin to go get an opportunity to fill in for what I consider to be a pretty equal football program in Kentucky, I think it just works out well for both parties.
Like, do you think there's similarities between that and Russell Wilson when he transferred from NC State to Wisconsin, and then afterwards, bam, he becomes an overnight sensation with Seattle? Do you think you're going to see that same comparison with Devin Leary?
Yeah, I mean, there's always that talk, when a great quarterback at NC State transfers out, oh, it's just like Russell Wilson. But I think that the Russell Wilson situation was a little bit different. Russ actually wanted to play baseball at NC State. Head coach wouldn't let him. So he went to Wisconsin where he could do both. With Devin, I really do think that it was just an agreement that both parties came to that was just in both of their mutual best interest. I want nothing more, and NC State faithful want nothing more than to go see Devin be the best he can be at Kentucky. But I think that this team's already hit its peak under Devin last season. So I think moving forward, it's probably best for everyone.
Yeah, that is a fun fact about Russell Wilson that some people may not know, but he actually wanted to play baseball more than he did football. But
Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst, where would you rate the North Carolina State season of 2022?
Well, in a vacuum, you don't take everything into consideration. If you're just thinking about preseason expectations to where they ended up, it's like a 4. It's below expectations. 8 wins is 8 wins. It's hard to win in college football. Everyone says it, and it's true for everybody. But I think when you factor in the fact that NC State started 4 quarterbacks this year, outside of that, we had defensive injuries. We had injuries all over the field. We had problems with play calling, which have since been resolved. Tim Beck's taken the head coaching job at Coastal Carolina. I really think that this team exceeded expectations that it had at midseason as opposed to preseason. And with that, I think you could layer him in at like a 7, like an 8, to be able to pull 8 wins out like they have and be able to play for 9.
Yeah, what was the overall reaction when Tim Beck left NC State? Did it help NC State? Did it hurt NC State?
I think it's just I think it has people hopeful for the future. Like I said, with Devin moving on, we're kind of ushering in a new era. We're losing Drake Thomas, we're losing Peyton Wilson, a lot of guys on the defensive side of the ball too. You're going to see sort of a new NC State football than you have in the past 3-4 years. And I think Tim Beck leaving now in the process of bringing up a guy like MJ Morris under center is just ultimately has everybody excited for what's next. I mean, we brought in Robert Ane, who has brought not only Brennan Armstrong, but Garrett Schrader up to new heights in their careers. And a lot of people are excited that MJ Morris can see those same peaks.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, what are the strengths and weaknesses of North Carolina that people need to look out for when watching the Duke Mayo Bowl against Maryland?
Yeah, so I think North Carolina State's biggest strength is their run defense. One of the best run defenses in the country. There were multiple times this year where we held opponents to negative rushing yards for an entire game. Really everywhere on the defensive side of the ball. It all starts with the linebackers. Drake Thomas, second team All ACC, might have been a little snub there, getting left out of first team. But you got Drake, you got Isaiah Moore, graduate student, kind of the heart and soul of this Wolfpack defense. And then Peyton Wilson, a guy who's been at the top of the ACC in the past, fought back from injuries and came back to have a really great season. We've got a talented defensive line, and we've got a first-team All-ACC corner and Aiden White and Shaheem Battle, who a lot would consider, to be the more NFL-ready corner. He's going to be on the other side locking down these electric Maryland receivers. So I think strengths, it all starts on the defense. And I think that's the first thing anybody would tell you. Weaknesses kind of all start on the offense. We're very much so a defensive-minded football program. We actually don't know who's going to be starting under center yet. If there's one thing Dave Doran doesn't like to tell us, it's when people are injured. So we won't know if we're seeing Ben Finley, who is coming off of an incredible performance against UNC, or if we're seeing MJ, the talented young guy who everyone expects to be the future of this program. But either or, we've struggled to move the ball a lot this year. We haven't exactly had the most consistent running game. We've had very splotchy performances from receivers. So, yeah, I would definitely say strength, defense, specifically run defense, and weaknesses, just moving the ball consistently.
So, did the expectations of the season change after that gritty win in Greenville?
In Greenville, Greenville was definitely a reality check that it wasn't going to be quite the walk through the schedule that a lot of people expected. I will say, that matchup, NC State versus ECU, is a rivalry that people don't really give the credit it deserves. I mean, they'd hate to admit it, but anytime they play us, it's their Super Bowl. We're the big school across the way, one that they get to face somewhat regularly, and anytime they do, it's normally a good game. We might have gotten bailed out with a win, but a win is a win. But it definitely, Devin definitely didn't look good in that game. That had a lot of people starting to question, whether he could repeat the success he saw last year. And there were struggles all around the field, but it was the first week of the season. You build off of that, you get better.
Oh yeah, East Carolina bringing out their A game against NC.
Yeah.
That's NC State.
Yeah, as long as they don't drink too much, they have a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, funny story about that game. I was there as a fan, and the stadium ran out of water. So to mitigate that, they were just handing out free beer.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, man!
That's
That's
just
the most
kinda-
ECU thing.
Yeah, that's how they do it down in Greenville.
I just hope there weren't any incidents there. So
Yeah, not that I saw. The only incident I saw was a missed field goal to win it. But
yeah. But speaking of the game against ECU, what are the highs and lows of the 2022 season for NC State? Exactly.
yeah, absolutely. Number one high, beating UNC. All you ever want to do if you're NC State, all else fails, you don't have the season you're supposed to. If you beat UNC, you've kind of made your season an all right one. And we're coming off a win last year, which was one of the greatest comebacks in college football history. I mean, 2 scores in the last minute and a half. It was just unreal. And then to turn it around this year with our scout team quarterback starting in place of, Devin Leary, who went down, MJ Morris, who went down, Jack Chambers haven't been looking his best, and come in and honestly outplay Drake May and really take control of that entire game despite it going to overtime. It always kind of felt like NC State had it in their possession and we're just waiting on the opportunity to win it. Absolutely the largest high there. Always feels good to beat UNC. Biggest low, a lot of people expected the Clemson game to be a tough game, but that was the game that NC State had to win to break that threshold that they've been trying to, and they didn't do it. I believe the final score was 30-20, but that doesn't really tell the story of the whole game. They kind of owned us from the opening kickoff all the way to the finish, and it really wasn't the performance a lot of people were hoping to see.
Right.
How good did it feel to beat UNC after Drake May's comments?
It was
How much better?
the six out of 9 victories in the latest against North Carolina.
Yeah. The Mays, they're UNC royalty, so they're always going to have something to say about NC State. And honestly, our philosophy's always been let them talk. They're gonna do their thing, like you just said. Last 6 out of 9, we're the football school within the 20-mile radius, so they can say what they want to. I mean, you can go to UNC, they're great at some things. You can go to NC State, we're great at other things. But if he's gonna talk, he's got to back it up, and I don't think he did in that game.
Mm-hmm. Of course. So, with this season overall, going into the Maryland game, how confident are you that the defense will be able to shut down the air raid? Because we talked about it a little bit, but they have like 3 receivers over like 300 yards.
Yeah,
they really spread it out.
Yeah, they do spread the ball out. One thing about Maryland to keep an eye on is that they've had 3 of those rotation receivers opt out of this bowl game. So that will definitely be something to keep in mind. And like I said, our best attribute on defense is our run defense, which really doesn't match up against Maryland well, with Tagovailoa being the air raid quarterback that he is in that system. But like I said, with a first-team All-ACC cornerback, Shaheem Battle on the other side, 2 experienced safeties in Tanner Ingle and Cyrus Fagan, I think we've got a good chance to slow it down enough for our offense to keep pace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's strength versus strength, weakness versus weakness. So
yeah.
But so who would be your ideal starter? Would it be Finley after that performance against UNC, or would you like to see someone else?
I think I'd go with MJ. I think MJ just has more talent. I mean, Finley's a great guy. I mean, he came in, he won us a huge football game. But if we're selling out on the future of this program being MJ Morris with Devin Leary transferring out, I think a bowl appearance in his true freshman season would go a long way. And not only building his confidence for next season, but understanding, getting more experience under the bright lights and the big time situations.
Well, we most definitely look forward to seeing some MJ Morris in 2023.
Yeah, we do.
And what went wrong? Like you answered that about Clemson, what went wrong against Clemson, but what went wrong against Syracuse, Boston College, and Louisville? What happened in those games?
Yeah, so Syracuse was our first football game without Devin Leary. That was right after the FSU game. And leading up to that week, we were still waiting to hear back on his scans to know if he'd be able to come back or not. And nobody knew until the day of the Syracuse game that he would be out for the season. Doran just decided to break that news sort of at the last second going into that game. And that was the first we saw of Jack Chambers in the starting position. He came in against FSU early in the second half, and we won that football game, but we did it without Jack completing a single pass. So everyone was kind of wondering, would he be able to drop back, deliver a pass on time to an open receiver, and we didn't see it. We had the bye week immediately following the Syracuse game. I think that game turns out a lot differently if that bye week comes before the Syracuse game. But against Syracuse, I think it was just the nerves of knowing that we'd be without Leary for the rest of the season, kind of figuring out where to go from there. Let's see here against Louisville, sort of the same thing. That was the game after MJ got hurt against Boston College. So another situation. We throw Jack back into the starting role, and we kind of know what we're getting this time more so than we did against Syracuse. So we start mixing him in with Ben Finley a little bit. And, a lot of people say it, if you're playing 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterback. You got to pick a guy. You got to stick with him. And I think that was ultimately NC State's downfall. And throughout all these games, we had play calling issues, just not being able to cater an offense to the guy you have under center. was a real struggle, especially when you're starting 4 quarterbacks in a year. It's difficult. It's difficult to scheme, a way that works to all these guys' best interests, but it definitely played a part in those losses.
Mhm.
So, what are the keys to victory against Maryland in the Duke Mayo Bowl on ESPN?
Yeah, I would definitely say moving the ball consistently is the number one key. I think the defense is going to do its job. It kind of has all season, bar, a couple missteps here and there. But I think if the offense can move the ball consistently, specifically in the run game, I'd love to see us get Jordan Houston and Michael Allen involved as much as possible, trying to move the chains. And depending on, who starts a quarterback, it really doesn't matter. The plan has to stay the same. Just stand in and deliver to the open guy. We're not really looking for the home run ball because we're not a home run ball offense. But just being able to connect on these 5 to 10 yard throws outside the numbers, being able to see the pockets inside the numbers, I think is the biggest key for NC State.
Mhm. And what do you think about like how much like a lot of like you have no like senior running backs and you do have Thayer Thomas, but most of the receivers are probably going to be coming back. How much have these guys grown through from the start of the year to where they are now?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's been a tough year to grow in, but a lot of
Mhm.
times those tough scenarios bring out the most growth in individuals. I think the biggest growth we've seen is in the running back room. Because I mean, last year we had both Zonovan Knight, who's absolutely killing it with the Jets right now, and Ricky Person, who's floating around the league trying to find a spot for himself. And both of those guys moved on. So filling that role in the offseason was a massive question mark. I think Jordan Houston stepped in well to be sort of the shifty and pass catching back that a lot of people thought he would be. He hasn't really had any explosive games, but we're just like I said, we're just not an explosive offense. We move the ball when we can, and that's what we do. Demi Sumo has looked like an absolute tank when he's been healthy. Unfortunately, that hasn't been for the larger part of the year. And in his absence, a freshman stepped up, Michael Allen. He's looked like another guy that could be the future of this program, breaking off massive runs and massive games. I remember against Wake Forest. I think he broke one off for like 25 yards when we needed it most, and that's the kind of guys you want in your offensive skill position rooms. I think we have exciting young pass catchers. We're going to be losing Devin Carter after this season, who was one of Leary's favorite targets and could never really figure it out with anybody else under center this year until Ben Finley in the UNC game where he absolutely went off. And Daryl Jones, who's a Maryland transfer, joined us for his graduate season. He's going to be out of here after this year, and he was one of MJ's favorite targets in the games MJ played. So I think we'll see a little bit out of him in the Mayo Bowl against this former team. But we got the young guys. Trent Penix will be back tight end for next year, and he's been a guy who struggled to stay healthy for the larger part of his career. But when he is healthy, when he plays, he's been great. And tight end's a position I know that Doran and his offense would love to utilize more. And then Terrell Timmons has been an early favorite for MJ's number one guy moving into the next year. So I think on offense, there's a lot of exciting young talent. And I think with that and all of these openings coming with people moving on after this season, I think Doran and his process and recruiting will bring in even that much more.
So, your reaction to because like next year, there's pod scheduling, right?
Yeah,
There's no Atlantic Coastal divisions.
right.
Yeah, does the path get easier for North Carolina State next year? And also, what's your reaction to Wake Forest not being on the annual schedule along with Clemson, Duke, North Carolina? Like at least you get to play like Duke more often,
Yeah,
annually, but you don't get to play Wake Forest annually. What's
yeah.
the reaction to all of it?
Yeah, I'll start with the Wake point. I absolutely hate not being able to play Wake Forest. It's always everyone always talks about NC State, UNC. I think Wake stacks up as probably our greatest rival as, from comparing athletics programs to where we stand, as well as academics. I think that they are the people we match up well against. And every year when we play Wake, it's normally one of the best football games in the ACC. Before this past year where we beat them by a couple scores, the 2 years prior, the score had been 45-42, flip-flopped. Wake was 45 year, we were 45 the next year, or flip that around. But I mean, it's always just a great football game. And in terms of pod scheduling, No, the path for NC State doesn't get any easier because we still have to play Clemson every year, and every year up to this point, that was always the challenge. I think, not having to schedule Florida State right now makes things a little easier for NC State because they're one of the most exciting young programs, sort of rebuilding back in the ACC, and I think they'll give it a good run for the money next year and championship contention. But I mean, still having to play Clemson, still having to play Mac Brown and UNC every year, and a promising young program at Duke, that just won 8 games under Mike Elko in his first year. I
Yeah.
I think that we definitely have one of the harder pods in the ACC, but that's what you want, you know? You don't wanna be that team in the ACC that gets to 10 wins by beating Boston College, Louisville, and Syracuse. You wanna do it by beating the best.
Right. And it's gonna be really fun seeing that first year without divisions. And
Yeah.
you got Notre Dame coming to your backyard.
Yeah, we absolutely do.
We don't know when the date will be exactly, but
Right.
could be September 9th, could be, sometime around October, November.
Yeah.
Who
And,
knows?
exciting point about that is, Notre Dame's leading the Sam Hartman lottery right now. So he might get another opportunity to come into Carter Finley and get smacked around a little bit.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's gonna be fun, because
Yeah, it'd be a
how
good game.
Sam Hartman works, and it's like you may get some upsets here and there at Notre Dame. You may get an
Mhm.
upset against Clemson because once again, Clemson coming to your backyard.
Yeah.
And Clemson was really down in 2021, but like 2022, they were still down, but not as down as they were in 2021.
Right, and in
Mhm.
2021, down was still a 10-win season, so I wish NC State's down years were 10 and 3.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
That's going. I know you'll be very happy to see that.
Yeah.
Mhm. So what was their reaction to getting Maryland? Was there another school you really wanted in the bowl game, or do you think it's fun? Or were you guys happy and think that that's fun to play a old ACC foe?
Yeah, I think initially the issue was with, just getting the Duke's Mayo Bowl in general. I think the way this season ended, a lot of people might have expected, a cooler bowl game. But to be able to play in Charlotte, it's only like a 2.5-hour drive from campus. It's cool. You'll see a lot of red in the stadium from NC State. And getting to play Maryland out of the matchups we could have drawn, I mean, I'd rather play Maryland than Iowa, even though an Iowa game would be hilarious. But, getting to play Maryland's cool, getting to rehash an old ACC rivalry that's actually split, 33 wins to 33 wins between NC State and Maryland. So, the winner's gonna get some good bragging rights until the schools get to meet again. And like you said earlier, it's strength against strength, weakness against weakness. I think it'll be an exciting football game as opposed to some of the other matchups NC State could have drawn.
Oh, true. Maryland's going to be a little tougher for you guys than Iowa because, like, Iowa's offense is just pitiful.
Yeah,
Just
and that's how ours has been for the larger part of the season. I think it would have been hilarious to see 2 amazing defenses go at it.
But yeah, it's like as long as Brian Ferentz is the offensive coordinator of Iowa, they're going to continue being horrible. So that is why
Yeah.
they don't rule by nepotism.
Mhm. So what are the thoughts of NC State fans on Dave Doran? I think I asked you this before we went live, but I don't think I
Yeah.
asked you.
Yeah, so, Dave's definitely the polarizing character. He always has a lot to say, and people always take it, one of 2 ways. I think ultimately, aside all the talk, all the things he does off the field, any antics he might have, any beef he might have with other ACC coaches or programs, he's taken this program to new heights. I mean, there's new standards in Raleigh. There was a time when 8 wins would have been a good football season, and now an 8-4 NC State is looked at as a failure. Outside of the expectations we had preseason, people want to see this team win 10 games, and Dave has gotten us to that point. Now comes the point where Dave is going to have to figure out a way to break through that threshold and become, the hitting that next step is really difficult, especially for a guy who inherited a program that he did and got it to this point. To keep growing is going to be something that we're still to see out of Dave. But for now, I don't think that there would be a coach that NC State could bring in that could do a better job with what we have than what Dave does currently.
It's going to be fun, watching some NC State in 2023.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's an exciting home slate next year. There's gonna be a lot of great games in Carter Finley. You talked about Notre Dame. We'll get Clemson at home. We'll get UNC at home again. There's going to be some fun times in Raleigh. Some exciting football games for sure.
Oh, and you're gonna have Miami coming to your backyard as well. So
Yeah, not as much a fan of that one. They kind of have a great track record against us in the last couple of years. We've lost some heartbreakers to them in my time at NC State,
yeah, just don't overlook Marshall like a certain team.
like Notre Dame did. Yeah,
I'm not gonna say who, but you maybe say who. But you got me there. Don't overlook Marshall.
yeah,
So a lot of people rag on State for playing a weak non-conference. I mean, you guys had that at home and home away with Texas Tech, but would you like
right.
to see some tougher games for NC State, or do you like those 3 easy wins? Or well, it wasn't easy against the Pirates, but
Yeah. Yeah, and exactly. Like people would see the game against ECU and write it off as being a weak out of conference game. But I wouldn't agree. Like I said, it's a rivalry game. They always play their best when we play them, and it's good for both schools when we play them to rehash a rivalry like that with an interstate team. Texas Tech turned out to be a great win by the end of the season because that's a program that had a couple of marquee wins of their own. And then, of course, we brought in UConn, a bowl team. They won their six. They got into a bowl, and an FCS school, which a lot of schools do. People can rag on the weak non-conference, but all of the teams we played ended up turning their seasons around and becoming better football teams.
Yeah, East Carolina was pretty good. They went on a little list of future Big 12 teams. They
Yeah,
gave let's see, they gave BYU the what for, they gave Central Florida the what for, but they couldn't get it quite right against Houston. But they came
right.
against Cincinnati, so 2-2 against the future Big 12, and it helped you guys a little bit. So
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, people can write it off for being weak, but all these teams ended up being a lot better than their names represent.
exactly, especially Connecticut, the
Yeah.
great, magnificent turnaround job they've had.
Mhm.
I mean, it was just wow. I don't know what to say.
so looking forward to next season, are you guys really excited to see what MJ Morris can become?
Yeah,
And
yeah, absolutely. Because we've seen some great flashes out of him, especially in that Wake Forest game where he just looked like the man. I mean, 200 plus passing yards, 3 touchdowns from a true freshman. It's exciting stuff, and I think getting him in with a first year OC at NC State is going to be really exciting to see what those guys can do together for the rest of his time here. And I think that's something that everybody around campus and these NC State fans should be really excited for.
I have some advice for NC State when going up against Connecticut next year.
Mm-hmm.
Treat them like Clemson. Treat everything like you're playing Clemson, and you'll be able to win the ACC. That I can guarantee you.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest killer against Boston College this year. Is looking forward to Louisville, and it kind of came around and bit us on senior day.
Yeah, you don't want to have a similar game like you did against East Carolina, where they almost beat you this year.
Right.
So, what do you think about the Robert and I hire? Like, did that excite Wolfpack fans, or were they like, meh? Like, what was
I think people had hit their breaking point with Tim Beck. I don't know if everything up to this point had been Tim Beck's fault directly. I certainly wouldn't blame it all on Beck, but it's easy to scapegoat the offensive coordinator for a failing offense. So getting Beck out and bringing in a guy who had Brennan Armstrong throwing for 5,000 yards and had Garrett Schrader looking like a dual threat Lamar Jackson type quarterback is it's really exciting. I mean, he has creative schemes. He knows how to scheme guys open, which I think was NC State's biggest killer this year. It was in our wide receiver route trees and not being able to scheme a guy open and expecting the receivers to create all this separation for themselves. I think Ane brings just a new dimension to an offense that really needs some work, and I think a lot of people are excited about it.
What would you grade the Robert Ane hire for offensive coordinator?
For what NC State is, for who we are as a program and what we're able to go out and get, I think it's a home run hire. You get a guy who's experienced. It's not like you're promoting up a quarterback coach or a receiver coach. You're getting a proven offensive coordinator out of the ACC who's put together some incredible offenses over the past couple of seasons. I think it's an A+ hire. I don't know if NC State could have done any better, to be honest, except for maybe like Phil Longo, but he was never going to come from UNC to NC State.
So with like Phil Longo, when he got hired by Wisconsin as a Big Ten TV contract money, where they're going to get $1 billion per year over the next 7 years, do you worry that you're going to see the same thing with Coach and I? You know, where some middling Big Ten team is going to get your offensive coordinator, like say after 2020.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely that's an issue that every college faces. You know, when they have a great season, a lot of times they get ravaged through. Coaching staffs oftentimes break up after exciting years. I think the biggest thing for NC State is doing the most with what we have while we have it. You know, there's going to be guys. We're not upper echelon of college football. I wouldn't really consider us a tier 1 program, even though we are to me. To the rest of the country, we definitely are not. So being able to take a guy like Ane, get him in our system and get him to build something for us, you know, if somebody comes in afterwards and wants him to move up, basically, you know, we can't stop him, but we have to be able to be, you know, appreciative of the time we had with him and take some of the things that he did while he was here and apply them to whatever hire we make next.
Well, I'll say this: if North Carolina State is able to win the ACC next year, you know, it'll be the first time since 1979. What year were you born, Wade?
2000.
Well, it'll be the first time in your lifetime that
Yeah.
the NC State win a conference title. So,
yeah, wouldn't that be something?
Yeah.
So what did you think about Boo Corrigan being the head of the committee and talking every week? Like, did you guys like that, or did you not really like all the spotlight on and scrutiny?
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of people feel a lot of ways about Boo Corrigan. Not necessarily directed at football, more so baseball. I don't know if either of you are big college baseball fans, but we had our big College World Series debacle a couple years ago where our team got sent home in the top when we were in the top 4. You know, unfortunate circumstance. That's kind of the nature of the game when you're playing in a COVID year. You know, things like that were always going to happen. But a lot of people took it directly at Boo Corrigan. And yeah, people aren't as big on Boo Corrigan as they probably should be. He's done some great things. I mean, he's moved money around for a lot of our programs to get them to the point where they are now. Football's flourishing. You know, we're making massive stadium renovations as we speak right now. You know, we're on the comeback in basketball. Baseball is still a great program. To see him in the college football playoff committee is kind of funny. Because, I mean, he's a guy you just see around campus sometimes, and it always up there making those massive decisions is funny. And he's one of those guys where, you know, it's kind of like the Jay Billis effect, where Jay Billis went to Duke. Anytime he commentates a Duke game, he tries extra hard to let everybody know he's not pulling for Duke. You know, Boo Corrigan's never going to give NC State favoritism. If anything, he's going to give us the short end of the stick as much as possible in a position like that.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming, Wade. You've been a lot of fun to talk to.
Before we go, where can the fans of NC State and non-NC State fans, so to speak, find you if they want to talk about North Carolina State, Wade?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the managing editor for NC State's student newspaper. You can find us on technicianonline.com, where we cover everything from sports to anything happening around campus and Raleigh in general. I'm on Twitter at Wade Bowman _. And you can find some of my bylines with AM New York. And yeah, thank you guys for having me on. It's been great to sit around and talk football. Like I said, I could do this any day. And I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks so much for coming, Wade. We really appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. You guys have a great one.
Talking more about NC State in the future with you.